78.64 last year. And then short sales 87.6 compared to 78.5 last year.
Well, that got less amazing.
Yeah, I know. Sorry. I was looking at the wrong column. I was looking at the volume.
Oh, okay.
But we had 723 foreclosures last year compared to 717. So they've dropped a little bit. Dropped substantially from 2009, where that was 85% of our market in 2009.
Now, is this tough to sell houses when the weather's 86 below zero?
Is that what it is?
It doesn't mean if it's 0 or 86 below.
It's still cold, right?
Yeah.
I don't know, 86 below would be a lot colder. I went snowshoeing yesterday. It's not that cold. And Monday, coming out of 80 degrees down to 8 degrees, that's brave, don't you think?
It's shocking.
There's probably a tad fewer people in the market. However, they ought to be in the market because Michigan's got that first-time home buyer credit or money. You get $3,000. You can't take it home with you. You can apply it to your closing costs or your principal balance, but that's free. It doesn't matter who you are. It doesn't matter how much income you make. As long as you're a first-time home buyer, I think that you haven't owned a home in the last 3 years. You guys talked about this last week, I think.
We did. A little bit.
So if that doesn't motivate people to get out, and once the money's gone, I think last I looked there was a little bit more than 11 million left. Sounds like a lot of money, but when you're spreading it across, it was over 13 million last week. So people.
They didn't hear Jackie. She said it was 13 million last week. It's 11 million this week. So
you're right.
What Jackie is telling you is that there's a quick depletion of the funds. So if you want to take advantage of it, get in there now.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Money going fast.
Exactly. There you go. We have statistics on our website. So if you want to see how the average sale price is going in your township, we have them divided up by township and school district. So you can compare Hanover Horton schools to Vandercook schools, so on and so forth, for average sale price. Thoughts, Bill?
Any legal questions for me today? You just want to stick with statistics?
No, I think people like to know where the market's going.
Yeah,
so
no, I
going
don't disagree, but if you ask me a question, make it a legal one, would you please?
Well, you have a personal opinion.
A personal life?
Yeah.
Beyond my professional life? No, not really.
I could probably vouch for that one.
I know you can.
Anything you want to know, Frank?
Not really.
Okay. All right, well, so one thought was maybe we should start by talking about how we should educate our clients, whether they're buyers or sellers. Anything you want to...
How much time you got? How long is this show? You
Right.
got 3 hours we can talk about this subject?
Let's just...
Because you want to educate them? Go ahead. What do you want to start
Well, let's start by educating sellers because we need sellers right now. Our market, we have not enough listings on the market.
Really?
Yeah, shortage. It's pretty low. So, if you were telling someone things they should watch out as a seller, educating them before they put their house on the market.
In terms of legal niceties, make sure they hire themselves a good listing agent. Ignore the advice from the listing agent that they should have a pre-sale inspection done to be able to hand to a purchaser. That's one of the worst things you can do as a seller, simply because now you're making a representation as to the condition of the property, which you really don't want to make, because if you hand that report to a purchaser and the purchaser relies upon it, it turns out the report is false. You've just vouched for it as a seller. But there are some listing agents who still recommend to the seller that in order to facilitate the sale, they hire an inspector, have an inspection report ready to hand to the prospective purchaser. Flip side of that is the purchaser is absolutely idiotic to rely upon an inspection report given to them by the seller because, one, you don't know the quality or qualifications of the inspector, and two, since it's not certified to you, the buyer, you have no ability to go after the inspector if the inspector screwed up. I mean, that's just a...
Why do the agents recommend that?
Because what they're trying to do is they think that it facilitates the sale by eliminating a step in the process and eliminating a contingency in the purchase agreement, and it really doesn't. I mean, as smart buyer isn't going to accept that report, and the seller is simply putting the seller himself in jeopardy by making that representation. But lots of listing agents, some listing agents, not lots, make that recommendation to the seller.
Okay, you have the report, there's a hole in the roof, it's not listed in the report. Where do we go there?
Yeah,
Because you know that's a hole.
if the seller knows about it, remember.
Of course, yeah, he knows.
Okay,
Okay.
so
But it's not in the report.
The
It's not in
inspector
the
missed it?
The inspector missed it and said,
and the seller didn't disclose it in the seller's
Right.
disclosure statement,
Sure.
you can only go after the seller. You can't go after the inspector because
Right.
the purchaser has no ability, is not entitled to rely upon the inspection report of the seller's inspector, except to the extent that it is put forth by the seller as a representation as to the condition of the house. So you can go after the seller for two reasons. One is they made a representation via the inspection report from silence that there was no defect in the roof, and second, they lied on the seller disclosure statement, so you got it in two ways. But the other advice to the seller is be candid in your seller's disclosure statement. If there is a defect or there was a defect and it's been repaired, disclose the fact that there was a defect and disclose the fact that you had it repaired. Have the repair bills or the invoices from the repair, etc., so you can demonstrate that the particular problem has been solved.
And I would tell people to declutter their house. I went into a property yesterday to look at it, and
I mean, if you're selling.
if you're selling, we're talking about sellers. So I told her before she put that on the market, she needed to strip down every room, and before she put anything back, she needed to make sure she absolutely needed it because she had a lot of stuff. And it was next stuff, but people need to see the house with their own stuff in it. When you have too much, and there's a lot of people who like to decorate for different holidays.
Yeah.
So our next holiday is Valentine's Day, right?
Yeah.
So Valentine's stuff are starting to come out.
No.
And,
People decorate their house for Valentine's.
And
What
I
do you use for decorations for Valentine's Day? Put a bunch of hearts in
Hearts.
it? Candy hearts in a
Hearts.
bowl?
heart wreath, heart
Heart-
flowers,
Really?
heart dishes,
Wow.
heart.
That's-
And my recommendation is don't decorate for those small holidays. Put those decorations in a box. Save them for your next place.
Like Columbus Day, do they have a bunch of boats?
Well, if you live on a lake on Columbus Day, you're automatically, maybe. So that would be my biggest advice to sellers. Before you put it on the market, get it ready, show ready. And
Do you watch hoarding?
I do not. That would, I
Please,
can't
you
handle
have to
that.
watch that. Please.
We've dealt with a listing that's,
Hoarding? That's a tough sell, isn't it?
yeah, this one's particularly is a short sale, and we're going on how many?
Well, I
2
don't want
years?
you to get into any particulars.
Yeah. So, but
Bill, have you seen that show, Hoarding?
I've never seen it. I wouldn't watch it.
and the reason I haven't
That's
seen
not my cup of tea. Okay?
I like
you
Bill.
think it'd be worthwhile?
Just try it.
All right.
Thank
You won't last long, but
yeah.
It is
The
shocking.
reason I don't watch any of those reality shows,
yeah.
one is I'm not sure I'm interested, but even if I were, I let Bill control the
Okay.
TV changer.
All right.
Because that is not that important to me, what we watch.
Okay.
Except for, there's one station.
Go
I
ahead.
won't say which station it is. I try to avoid
It
47
espouses
in the evening.
it espouses
MSNBC in the evening.
It espouses political views with which she does not necessarily agree.
They're so far left, it's not even funny.
At any rate, the other thing I'd advise a seller to do is get your documentation together from when you bought the property. Copy the deed, copy the title policy that you got, as I say, repair bills, things like that, so that you don't go scrambling for these things when the purchaser makes an offer and there's a contingency in it. You just have everything in order. That would be the next thing I'd advise. But from a seller's perspective, it's easier. You want to make certain you make full disclosure on your seller's disclosure statement. Don't lie, don't even shade the truth, because there are plenty of decisions in Michigan that say you can't imply. In other words, even though you don't make a direct misrepresentation, if what you say leads the purchaser into a false belief as to the condition of the property,
Sure.
you seller. Now, I should also say that under our law in Michigan, a seller of a residential property does not have to give a seller's disclosure statement. They can refuse to give it, so they make no representations regarding the property. The buyer buys as is. The risk for the seller is that the buyer can back out of the deal if it's a residential property up until the instant of closing if the seller doesn't give a seller disclosure statement. And in addition, if I were representing a buyer and the seller refused to give a seller's disclosure statement, I'd tell the buyer to walk. There's something going on here that the seller knows that the seller is refusing to disclose, and therefore I tell the buyer, don't do the deal.
Now, once the deal is complete,
there's no harm, no foul. Yeah,
seller's out.
Seller's out. Yeah, there's under the Seller Disclosure Act. Yeah,
the next day the roof falls in. Too bad.
Buyer buys as is.
Okay.
Seller has made no representations whatsoever. The seller did not conceal the defect, and the seller, it's not a hazardous condition. The seller's off the hook. If the seller conceals a defect, you get this fairly frequently where there's a leak in a basement, and they'll paint over where the leak was. They won't fix it, or they'll put furniture up against the wall, that sort of thing. Michigan provides that even if you don't give a seller's disclosure statement, as a seller, if you conceal a defect so that it's not discoverable by the purchaser, either by the purchaser or the purchaser's inspector, seller would have liability for that. Same thing would be if there was some defect in the roof that you failed to disclose. There's a case probably 5, 6, or more years ago in Michigan where there'd been a fire, and the attic beams, which were unaccessible, the roof joists were charred and had been damaged, and the seller had concealed that by putting drywall over so that the purchaser and the purchaser's inspector couldn't see it. The seller ended up having liability for that.
Does the buyer have liability if they don't disclose that they don't qualify for a mortgage?
Generally not, because you're not making a representation upon which the seller is entitled to rely.
You don't think so when I write a purchase agreement and it's contingent on financing, buyer knows they've been turned down by 10 banks, let's say?
Well, why would they even go through it? If they know they're not going to get financed.
No, that's not a misrepresentation. You're not making a misrepresentation to the seller. The fact that it's questionable that you're going to qualify for a loan is not something that's actionable by a seller. I can't imagine it would be. Now, if they made some affirmative representation in a financial statement that was false, then the seller may have a cause of action based upon that fraud. Again, they have to show damages as a result of it.
Yeah, I mean, if a seller moved out and lost another transaction as a result of it.
Yeah, if they made a false representation in a financial statement given to the seller's relying upon it, and is damaged as a result, then you have a cause of action. But that's not what usually happens. What usually happens is you simply have a contingency on financing. It turns out the purchaser doesn't qualify. You don't have a cause of action.
Okay. So what advice would you give the buyer before buying to educate themselves?
Well, let's do this also from the seller. Let me deal with the seller side, and the seller side is with respect to that issue you just raised in terms of qualifications of the buyer. That's why you want a buyer's agent to have a pre-approval or pre-qualification letter of the buyer, which is presented along with the offer, so that the listing agent and the seller don't spin their wheels dealing with a purchaser over which there's going to be controversy later on in terms of their credit worthiness. See what I'm saying?
So if I'm a seller and I list my house, I want to make sure that the person who sells the house is a buyer's agent, not a seller's agent?
No, I don't need that, but I want to make certain that when an offer is presented, I would like to have some assurance that the buyer is reasonably qualified or will qualify, or that I'm saying it wrong, that there's a reasonable prospect that the buyer will qualify for the mortgage, and the way that's handled these days is sort of pre-approval letter. They're pre-approved for a set amount of a mortgage, depending upon certain other conditions, but we know then that the buyer has the ability to get a mortgage for X amount of dollars.
So maybe understanding the paperwork might be a good idea for a seller.
Well,
Reread
that's true on both sides to understand
Right.
the paperwork, and Michigan law provides that a person who signs a document is presumed to have read it and to have understood it.
Okay. So if an agent is just saying this is what this paragraph means, this is what this means, and they're not actually reading it, they're still liable or presumed to have read it?
Well, They are, but the agent also is engaging in the unauthorized practice of law. The agent is giving advice as to what the legal consequences are of a particular provision in a purchase agreement. The agent's not supposed to be doing that. A real estate agent is providing real estate services, not legal services. And the instant they start giving an opinion or advice on the legal consequences.
Well, not an opinion, but this purchase agreement, or this paragraph means they want a pest inspection at seller's expense.
Yeah, that's fine. That's not legal advice,
right?
But when you start talking about, this is the legal consequence of making this particular representation, or here's the legal consequence of having this thing done in connection with a transaction, or here's the legal consequence of a seller's disclosure statement, that's legal advice.
Yeah. Okay.
Leave that to a qualified lawyer, and then, as I talked about a month or so ago, make sure that you're not having the same lawyer. One lawyer cannot represent the seller and a buyer in the same transaction, even in a residential transaction.
Think of the money
much less a commercial transaction. They don't save money by that.
Any listings?
You know what? Jackie, did you list anything while I was gone?
Mm-mm.
Got some coming up, but I didn't happen to list anything down in St. Martin.
Go to the website.
Yes, thinkingrealestate.com. I don't know why I don't say that after. Thinkingrealestate.com.
Welcome back.
And you can call me, 780-3800. Got some things happening. Would love to have things happening with our listeners.
Thank you.